like reconcile the results that we have from previous research. If we understand the scope conditions under which those relationships hold, we'll be better at pushing the envelope, right? It's like and identifying the other areas where our research becomes relevant. That's what I have to say.
Well, those are hard acts to follow. Maybe I'll take a different tack and just be a little more practical. And so first, I'd like to give a pitch for an issue area in FDI that I think could use some more research. Second, I'll bring up an approach to research that I think is underused. And third, source of research questions. So first, pitch for a topic area. In my usual life, I generally work on issues of conflicts between multinational corporations and the governments of the countries in which they invest. So when expropriations happen, when governments, when firms accuse governments of mistreating them, when governments accuse firms of having played outside the rules, and basically, I guess I should preface this with an overriding goal of why I do IPE is the idea that I'm motivated by trying to find those instances where democracy and globalization can coexist. So if you're familiar maybe with Roderick's book, Daniel Roderick's book, The Globalization Paradox, he kind of articulates this idea that maybe if you're deeply globalized, you just can't have sovereignty anymore, you can't have democratic polity anymore. And so I like it when my research finds these cracks, or maybe bigger than cracks, where people can still make their own sovereign choices in the context of the polity in which they live, and they can reap benefits from globalization. And so, luckily for me, I found really motivating questions in the area of conflicts between multinational corporations and governments. And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with these lawsuits that take place around the world nowadays as facilitated by bilateral investment treaties. The idea that this ISDS, investor-state dispute settlement, is a hot topic that newspapers are writing about and Obama gives speeches about and things like that. So we're definitely in an era where people think about conflicts between multinationals and governments in a way that maybe, at least from my reading of history, hasn't been in the public eye for a couple of decades now, right? In the 50s, 60s, and 70s, there was one kind of set of conflicts going on between multinationals and governments, but nowadays, BITS and other institutions have really brought these conflicts to the fore again. So I think there are a lot of open questions with regard to these kinds of relationships. And I think it comes down to the idea that, as we know, governments around the world want FDI, but they also want social policy and environmental policy and to be responsive to their democratic publics and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that issue area of looking at conflicts or dispute resolution mechanisms between firms and governments might be a very rich one for future research. I was talking to a colleague about this recently, and she mentioned, well, maybe we're in a League of Nations era, in the sense that all of these arbitration institutions and ICSID and BITS, maybe all of that is going to fall apart in the next decade or so, because when you try to explain it to a layperson on the street, really like, what are we letting multinationals do? They can sue governments? What? So suffice it to say, I think it's something that people don't understand enough, whether in the scholarly community or outside of it, and it could be a good area of research. Second, I wanted to mention the idea that in terms of approaching IPE, one maybe practical way to go about reaching out across artificial divides is to very self-consciously identify and compare or contrast or study not just one thing at a time. So don't just study FDI, but compare and contrast FDI and sovereign debt. For example, I published an article recently about the fact that basically at the end of the day, multinationals and sovereign bondholders aren't necessarily on the same side. Sovereign bondholders don't mind if multinationals get expropriated, so long as that means the government got some more cash and they can pay their bonds or they can pay their debt. So I think there's a lot of room for comparing across capital flows, remittances, and what kind of impacts that has. I think there's work on remittances and exchange rates, etc. I talked about, in the context of this paper, reaching out across
across trade and investment, so we don't have to identify anymore as PE of trade or PE of investment. We can do a little of both. And migration is a great kind of understudied area of IPE, I would say. And so the idea that migration has impacts in IPE, not just via remittances, but also via all kinds of other mechanisms that could take place with regard to, say, diaspora investment in FDI and such things. So if one is looking for a research question, if one is looking to kind of get to a broader question, one way to get there is to say, all right, here's literature on FDI, what are they missing? What if they also consider portfolio investment in the same article? What if they also consider the role of development banks in supporting projects in the same article? So I think there's a lot of opportunity. And then finally, I would just mention that Pablo and Juan mentioned quite a bit about how we relate to economists, and I just wanted to bring up how we relate to business scholars, or scholars of international business. You might be familiar in the United States in particular, business schools are more and more hiring political scientists in sort of departments that are kind of a mishmash of poli-sci, econ, sociology, the softer side of business maybe. And I think that principle shows that institutionally, at least in higher ed, people are trying to kind of create these interdisciplinary connections. I think a good way to see about figuring out what does business have to do with politics and vice versa is to even, maybe this sounds boring, but comb through, the Journal of International Business Studies or Strategic Management or other prominent business journals and look at their abstracts and think, what if we added a political variable in here? What are they missing? What does an understanding of the optimality of the firm's investment under these conditions? What if those conditions are muddied by politics? That kind of thing. And so these might sound like very micro suggestions, but my hope is, or at least in my own research, my hope is that eventually these kind of micro level, searching through literature and thinking about adding variables and comparing across capital flows and whatnot might eventually, add up, maybe not to an Einstein kind of revelation, but something greater than the sum of the parts.
I don't know if you have any questions to what language or yes? You can collect a few questions now.
So I have Professor Lee. I pointed out that IT is writing like a theoretical framework, a big step towards big theory of IT. And I wonder, like, to what degree is this this challenge like in need of data? Like, to what degree data is limiting the advance of what we has in academic field? Like, do we need are we really looking into more de-aggregated data, or is the method that is not really what is getting us advanced?
Thanks for coming. This is terrific. A lot of us are going to Oxford next 2 weeks from now, and I think I saw one of the keynote speeches. I can't remember which cover it is, but the title was "Economics is too important to economists." I don't know what the speech is going to be about, but the question I'm going to ask is, what can and all of you said something already. You can be more precise because we have a number of students here at CIDE, and the students here at CIDE, they take a lot of economics, but they are political scientists, so they know a lot of political institutions, statistics as well. But when compared to economists, they have this sort of training in institutions and social movements and so on and so forth. What would you tell these? So I get so interested in that getting feedback from you. What can they do to understand what can they contribute to understanding economics, coming from this political science track. And I know in methodology there might be a little bit of in economics to get really strong training. Number one, should they get the same? Should they work harder to get the same training as economists? Is there advantage in the topics? Is there advantage in having different types of methods? Or
Yeah, the papers, research that we've talked about today and referred today, is all very empiricist and positivist, and it resonates with a lot of what we do here in CIDE. And for that reason, it's been very well received. But there's a branch of that nobody has mentioned today, big part of IPP, which comes from critical IR theory, which is critical, which is normative, which questions ontologies and epistemologies and various assumptions like that. It is not empiricist, it's theoretical and philosophical, and comes more from humanities than from the social sciences. Where does that fit in the future of IPP?
So this is a great question. So I actually was talking to a physicist, and he said it turns out the starting of physics is started with measurement. So if you can't measure anything, we couldn't study physics like we're studying today. And so one thing that's very interesting when I write candidate letters, especially for Ivy League schools. And one thing I always have to defend candidates somehow because I do empirical work and some theoretical work, and usually the people I review tend to be doing empirical work. And usually there's this bias against people doing empirical work. Oh, all you do is just run some congressional letters. Right? I remember I did this multiple times in my tenure letter for people who are getting tenure and people promoting from a social professor is making the argument, what's the relationship between theoretical work and empirical work? Very simple. Einstein would not have gotten the Nobel Prize in physics if there was no empirical evidence supporting his theory. Very simple. You watch the movie on Hawkins. Hawkins became famous because there were experiments showing that he might be right. Same thing. If we don't have solid empirical evidence validating our arguments, then we could never get rid of some arguments. Then our theory would be conflicting assertions, and all of them could be right. And we would never be able to advance our theoretical understanding in a coherent and consistent manner. So data is just really fundamental. Now, what's the difference between economics and political science? One thing that two things are very, very different, and which is I always make the argument to a lot of colleagues, which is really unfair to political scientists. So when you publish work in economics now, and actually some of us, a lot of my colleagues actually sent papers get published in economics, and I get some stuff published in international business journals. One thing that's very different between economics journal and political science journal is the following. That is, there's a very clear division of labor in economics. Right? You do theoretical work, you don't need statistical work in your theoretical paper. Open up AER and GPE to see that, right? And econometrica, right? So if you do empirical work, your theory is probably 4 paragraphs because the theory is established by somebody else. You're taking that hypothesis, you're testing that. Your contribution is doing it in such a creative way. It's a difference between theoretical physics and experimental physics. We don't do that. So when you get paper science, political science, and I tell my PhD students, you face this dilemma. And either people say your paper is not theoretical enough, or they say your empirical work is not empirical enough. What do you want me to do? You want me to be a scientist? You so I think that's the backwardness of political science. And so in a way, economics is closer to being, true science than we are, because there's a clear division of labor, and we don't. In our paper, we have to have some kind of theoretical theory, and we create artificially and somehow, and then we have this empirical work, and so in the end, there's no clear division of labor. So that's really bad news for people who are in political science, but that's the reality you have to deal with. However, compared with what we had before, we have gone way better. And so honestly, I do think we have a leg up against a lot of the economics graduate students. And I was in grad school, I was in classes with them, and I think they're way more focused on the technical aspects of things and lose sight of the true causal data generation process and what exactly is the true theory that motivating the phenomenon observed. And I think we have a leg up because political scientists somehow are more to the real events like Pablo, and we live in the same world. My God, we have to explain the same world. Right? So about the critical theory, I can't claim I'm an expert on that. I'm 100% ignorant about critical theory. But I have to say, like, now I'm working on a paper with a friend of mine who's a British economist. And in the end, the reason why he is a qualitative critical theory person, and the reason why we worked together, and eventually I convinced him, and he said, that's why you do this empirical science, because you can achieve cumulative progress, and there's a common standard by which you can evaluate who is right or wrong at the treaty code. And he said for him, in the British IPE, he's sick of it, because everybody was right, nobody was wrong, and the same debate repeated itself again and again. It's like bad karma, right? Happening all over again and again. They're debating the same question like every other few years. Nobody can agree what's the scope of that, and nobody bothered with measuring things. And I think if we talk about normative implications, it's got to come out of very solid, robust empirical patterns we can observe, right? If we cannot base our normative implications upon solid empirical evidence and patterns, then the normative implications are driven by personal agendas, and we can't believe that anything. I'm just too cynical. Sorry.
So I'll take the question, please. Like the second question first is like, and what advice we could give to students. So the first one is stay current. So it's very important that it's like that you have enough tools in your toolkit that allows you to tackle the question that you care about, more than, and it's like try to find a question that could be answered with the tool that you have. Because what pushes us is the interest of understanding the world. It's like not having a hammer and looking for a nail. It's like an nail. Right? So stay current means, right? It's like take as many opportunities as you can. Right? It's like to learn new tools. Right? It's like learning methods, learning how to apply them. And it's like and that's probably on the empirical side. On the theoretical side, it's like I like the language of mathematics because it forces us to think. It's like I'm not very good at holding two ideas on my head at the same time. It's like so it's really hard for me to develop an argument. It's like I have to find conflicting ideas on my head. So the best way I can do to analyze those is put it on paper in ways that allow me to walk through that are not making a mistake, right? In the logic of the argument, right? Where I say that A, B, and C need to be, right? Or under which conditions they do, right? And that, I think, is one, it's like, if I have any complaint about current, IP as we understand it, is that we are not paying much attention, right, to the first part. It's like the derivation of hypotheses, right? Where do those hypotheses come from, right? And so sometimes we have many papers that says like, it's like people think that this is the case, and people think this is the case, and we don't know even if we should expect that. Right? It's like, and even people working on experimental accounts, right? It's like I try to show us, right, that at no holes, we don't want to make them know, right? It's like so. Stay current, it's like in terms of your methods, but also try to think about your theories as rigorously as you can, by making sure that the logic of the argument holds. It's not that somebody said and somebody said. It's not about telling stories. It's about accumulating knowledge. And the best way to do that is to work on it for a common framework. So that's the idea. And that's what I said. So we don't stop. We really want to stay learning. We don't stop. Learning, and it's like after we graduate. It's like we keep learning all the time. And it's like when we start thinking about our endeavor the same way that people in the hard sciences do today, is that we are part of a lab that are advancing an agenda, and it's like in trying to better deal with the data that we get, or we collect, or we create, right? Because through experiments, then we're better able to accumulate knowledge. Right? It's like, and that's key for understanding and being the second part, which is my advice to students, stay relevant. It's like, and staying relevant, right, requires that not much talking about, requires staying relevant.
I would just say that I'll have normative agendas. I kind of gave mine away, and I like the idea from British IPEs that they're upfront about having normative agendas. That being said, what makes me excited as a scholar is to creatively test this stuff, and so creatively finding data or putting together data quantitatively or qualitatively. That kind of creativity, that fun, I think that's what gets me going, and so. Maybe economists feel that, or maybe they don't, but the idea that we can do experiments, we can interview people, we can do quantitative, we can do like traditional regressions like my favorite A. I mean, there's just so many options out there that how could you not love this empirical IP stuff?
I have two questions. My first question regards, so it would be, if you were given the chance to choose again what your master's programs or PhD programs were, or what were the subjects that you chose, what would you change? Because I agree with you that political scientists, we have this comparative advantage because we always are trying to present our arguments in a compelling way and to present them as simple as possible, because we want to convince both economists and or international lawyers, as you mentioned in your paper that deals with international law. So we have this advantage that we're always trying to put it in simple terms. We're always trying to catchphrases or terms that regular people in the street can understand. So, but should we also start looking at maybe majors in business administration or the work of business administration? Because my idea is that many people who work in the government and make decisions regarding finance or taxes, they have this education on business administration or business in general. Should we start approaching business with research agendas? What would be like the benefit? Or what are your insights on this? The question would be, Professor Garriga showed like a chart of the different, of the number of variables that were, no, it was a chart that presented the number of research papers that found that, like, for example, market size had like 3 papers where it was positive, where the coefficient was positive, and 3 which it was maybe negative. So what are the dangers of having this availability of cherry picking your results for your paper? Because I was doing my thesis work with Dr. Garriga and with Dr. Benton on taxes and on the relationship between taxes and FDI, and there's like a huge lot of results that you can pick and you can put in your literature review. So how can you maybe do something to address this cherry picking danger?
I was just wondering, it has to do with the paper historical, or it has to do with this more philosophical concern around and it's to what extent we think we're responsible for the political implications of our findings. Because at least I was trained to find a good question, find the best way to test it, and show that this holds. And the political implication is something people last paragraph of the conclusion, after the review, it says, so what? Like, we're not trained to think of political implications, and sometimes I think that thinking up front of political implications is actually disturbing my work. If I really start thinking, well, what does it mean? I should go tell voters, go left. Well, you can, it's a huge council or whatever, but it's, I mean, that's maybe what you sort of suggesting. And my work is less conflicted than terrorism, research on terrorism, or limits on migrations. So I was thinking, to what extent your influence or worry about political implications of your own research?
I'm on the idea about what kind of master's and PhD programs to do, or what kind of career trajectory to take. At least from my knowledge of IP scholars who are coming out now or who have been assistants like me for a couple of years, I don't think I know anyone who did not either work for a year or intern somewhere or work at a bank or something. I don't think. I'm really running through all the people I know. Everybody took at least a year to be in either in government or business or somehow. So I think that's almost a given in this issue area. I don't know if you agree. I'll just say about political implications. I'm kind of with Adam Smith on this idea that there's a division of labor in the world, and that labor can be appropriate. So, as much as the discipline sometimes, as Juan was saying, pushes us to be all things to all people, right, to have a theory and the gears and everything, I think some separation between a policy paper, the white paper on a topic, and the actual research behind the topic is. That being said, I don't want my stuff to languish, right? If it does have policy implications, I think it's important. So there's this growing advocacy idea in political science that one advocates for oneself, right? When you put your stuff on Twitter, you publish in blogs, yada, yada, yada. So I don't think that's necessarily wrong. It's not having the kind of official impact that being a policy role would have, but at least it's getting stuff out there so that it can be picked up.
So I tend to shy away from policy implications because that requires us to giving advice to people about things that we don't know. Because basically we cannot explain the past and it's like, what I can tell is like there's uncertainty. When an election's coming, there's uncertainty, I can put some boundaries and uncertainty, and that's all I can say. But it's like pushing for a specific policy agenda is beyond my pay grade. And I think I tend to shy away from that. I don't think. So when this is relevant is when it's like policy makers pick our research and try to identify where the best recommendations that can work. Right? And again, it's like most of us are doing, and it's like develop theories that are, probabilistic in nature. Right? And analysis are also based on probability distributions. It's like of different types of covariates. Right? It's like, so do we know the specific instance will provide advice falls on the regression line, or is it like an outlier? Or is it how far from the regression line is it? And it's like, and if it is, right, it's like if we're able to identify that away from the regression line, what makes them matter? Right? And I think that's it's like a different kind of expertise. It's like, things that I like and things that I dislike. Those are my preferences. It's like, and those are my values. Right? It's like, when I call for advice and I call for values, I'm called to provide something that will allow us to interpret and represent. It's like, and again, since I'm not that confident that I got everything right, and I'm really trying to try away to predict it.
Okay, I'll start with Ricardo's question about the best of the question. Is it web?
Oh, right, yeah.
Goes through time machine.
Everything is perfect.
So I probably would have, I told a lot of it last night, I wanted to major in grad school in economics. My position was turned down by the graduate director, and he was afraid I wouldn't have enough political science in my portfolio. I went to econ to take a lot of classes anyway. I thought that was great. The only thing I would have done differently is that I would have insisted on getting at least a master's in economics. I did all the classes, I didn't, think of that. Or I would have gotten a master's in statistics, or instead I would have gotten a master's in computer science or double major in computer science. I've seen, I've seen my colleagues and friends and over the years, like people who were computer science and masters and use all the computer science stuff in computer science and just did amazing things. My former colleague Scott Bennett at Penn State, he was a computer science major at Michigan. And he did, get all the NSF grant money and did this software, and not everybody in conflict uses. And you've seen tons of people like that. So you need, basically the thing here is that honestly we're in a very strange profession, right? You're paid to do what you love or hate to do. So it's a very strange profession. It's actually, so in a way, it's a very cruel profession. I tell my students, and you may be surprised by those statistics. And there are two statistics I always tell my students in my junior college. And number one, and people who finish their at ABD stage, this is not just political science. This is across. They did a survey across all disciplines. And on average, half of those people will get PhD. It's brutal. And then the first day in the new faculty orientation, when I was an assistant professor at Penn State, somebody asked in the audience, asked the senior vice president, and how many of us will get tenure? Or about 160 of us went there that year. The answer was about half. And so then the question said, what happened to the other half? Oh, some of you will do so well and recruited by other places. Some of you will now see the writing on the wall and will leave, and a very small proportion of you will stay on and you will deny tenure. Essentially, basically 50% of you will stay here in tenure. It's a very cruel profession, very competitive, cutthroat. You have hungry grad students, hungry assistant professors, and on the other hand, there's no other job better in the world if you love what you're doing. Right? You're paid to do. You don't have to come here 8 in the morning. What can be better than that? Now, come to think about policy implication, it also relates to Ricardo's question about market size as conflicting effects. What's wrong? What's wrong here is that either size can be measured in multiple ways. Maybe they didn't use the same measurement. Maybe they didn't use the same sample. Maybe look at different countries. Or it just maybe they have conflicting theories. That's your job to resolve that. So instead of seeing that as a nuisance, you should see all those conflicting things as opportunity. That's how you make a career. So one thing that's interesting is that really ties into the question about should we be more proactive in engaging in normative things. And I think given all the statistics, conflicting, I think our profession asks for a very perverse type of personality. That we need to be very cocky and we need to be very humble at the same time. It's really strange. I've seen the most successful people in my discipline. They're the most defensive people, aggressive people when they defend their arguments at the conferences. You're on the path to do this. So they just like defend their arguments, their evidence, their theory like their own baby. Why not? I would have done that because I poured all my heart into doing the best work I can. You need to be confident, you need to be cocky about your work, you do the best work you can. On the other hand, and I always ask people, can you anticipate which of your paper will become a class cited? Nobody can predict. I couldn't predict why some paper cited 500 times, why some paper got cited once. There's no prediction. I poured equal amount of heart into that. I did the best I could. I don't know. So you don't know which day somebody is going to come along and say, hey, you did a crappy work. And that's true. And I honestly, I had all these, failure moments when people say, oh, gee, your variable is going wrong. And, it happens all the time. So I think when we try to say, my research tells us this policy we should adopt, I think we need to have a little bit of humility, right? And you don't know that your evidence is the definitive evidence on that question. And your theory is so waterproof that you actually can walk on water. And we just don't know that, right? So you guys want to talk about the first question?
So the first question, I did my PhD coursework at UCSD, and UCSD at the time, and according to today, is a very homogeneous program. So, and I really value that because it forced me to take the courses that were offered as opposed to the ones that we had chosen, right? And I saw that created some discipline because we got the same training throughout. And the emphasis was basically on research design, sound empirical analysis, and some formal model. And compare this, it's like IR and Americanism did the same thing, right? Now, it's like a problem because it's like the values from UCSD, not as in our cooking house. So all going institutions are and thinking about the world the way that America is used to do. But for me, it was a very moment getting familiarized with a field of study that I hadn't seen before. I had an MBA, I did my MBA work in something work in Japan, and Japan is like IR scholarship was English school, basically. So it's very different from what I did. So I saw that in my students at Columbia, for instance, we had young, so we could choose from the most varied backgrounds and paradigms and orientations that they wanted to. And there, it's like you didn't have the drive, you didn't get the training. And it's like you didn't have it wasn't in you, right? It's like you wouldn't get the training that would make you, and it's like a more good scientist. And so I think sometimes it's like consumers have a choice to do, consumer choice to do. And I'm happy I didn't have it. It's like, and I think that's one of the reasons why I think that we have to speak a common language. And that speaking a common language requires at least like getting a common learning background and giving other issues that to is like other experts. Again, as Rachel said, the vision of data. And some people are thinking about that of data. And it's like, what are we as humans? And also fixed out that I'm not that good at that. I'm not interested either, right? So I shy away from those.
Does anyone ask a question? Thank you very much for coming, for sharing your experience and your research with us, and thank you all of you for staying today. Just after 4 stays in the day, it's an act of faith. So we'll see when you need to come back. Thank you very much for your time.
Yes, so take care.